Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which time you are watching this video. I am Professor Ruben Ramos, and this is another asynchronous class on superhero comic books, in contemporary society. Now we are going to start Scott McCloud's Chapter 3, which is called Blood in the Gutter. When I was very young, I had a recurrent daydream that the whole world was just a show put on for my benefit. That unless I was present to see things, they just ceased to exist. Please take a good look on this frame here that this boy depicted over here represents very clearly Scott McCloud's thought and perceptions when he was a young kid himself. Everything that existed because of his existence. So the world would take form just because it was in front of him. Everything that was back ceased to exist. I don't know if that sort of thing happened to any one of you students as much as it has happened to Scott McCloud, but with me, your professor, it has happened in specific situations. For instance, when I was a young kid, like 5, 6, 7 years old, I used to love a small playground park that was a public playground park back in the city where I was living with my parents at the time. And I liked that place so much. I had so much fun in that place. But as much as I can remember, I was the one who granted the place to exist. How so? I imagined in my head that when I wanted and I could come to the place to play, the park existed. When I had to go home because it was lunchtime or it was getting dark or it was simply time to go, I would walk out of the park and the park ceased to exist. It was almost a superpower, if you call it that I would give life and existence to that particular place. And when I wasn't able to be there, that place simply ceased to exist. In our next synchronous class, I will ask if you have any sort of personal example regarding that same issue as I had and apparently Scott McCloud had too. Let's move on his theory. So again, pretty much as the world taking form and existing because of the kid's presence to grant it its life. Later in life, I found others who had similar daydreams as children. None of us ever really believed these theories, but we had all been fascinated by the fact that they could not be disproved. Even today, as I write and draw this panel, I have no guarantee that anything exists outside of what my 5 senses report to me. I've never been to Morocco, but I take it on faith that there is a Morocco. I've never seen the Earth from space firsthand, yet I trust that the Earth is round, unlike many and many people that live nowadays and uh, really believe that Earth is flat and plain, right? Among other stupid theories, if you allow me to say that. I've never been in the house across the street, yet I assume it has an interior, that it isn't just some big movie set. In this panel, you can't even see my legs, yet you assume that they are there, even though they are not. All of us perceive the world as a whole through the experience of our senses. Yet our senses can only reveal a world that is fragmented and incomplete. Even the most widely traveled mind can only see so much of the world in the course of a life. Our perception of reality is an act of faith based on mere fragments. As infants, we are unable to commit that act of faith. If we can't see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, or touch it, it isn't there. The game Peekaboo plays on this idea. Gradually, we all learn that even though the sight of mommy comes and goes, mommy remains. So if you really take a look on the Peekaboo game displayed over here, you are gonna take a look that it is a comic book, according to previous Scott McCloud's theory. And if you take a closer look into the baby's reaction, you will see happiness and then a little bit of confusion and maybe even so sadness to be happy again, right? So it's kind of fascinating to see the perspective of that game dissected by Scott McCloud, because we see that as young kids we learn deeply on our five senses to understand the world. We are unable, as McCloud states, to have or display an act of faith. This comes later on in life when we realize what faith is, and we can compromise, at least at some point, with it. This phenomenon of observing the parts but perceiving the whole has a name. It's called closure. In our daily lives, we often commit closure, mentally completing that which is incomplete based on past experiences. Every time that we go to the supermarket and we see a beverage, such as soda, beer, or others, and we can't see the entire name or even icon that represents that beverage, we fill in the gap. We mentally complete the image and the words that are probably missing with a very easy perspective on doing so because of our past experience. Some forms of closure are deliberate inventions of storytellers to produce suspense or to challenge audiences. Others happen automatically without much effort, part of business as usual. In recognizing and relating to other people, we all depend heavily on our learned ability of closure. In an incomplete world, we must depend on closure for our very survival. Closure can take many forms, some simple, some complex. Sometimes a mere shape or outline is enough to trigger closure. The mental process described in chapter 2, whereby these lines become a face, could be considered closure. Every time we see a photograph reproduced in a newspaper or magazine, we commit closure. Our eyes take in the fragmented black and white image of the half-tone patterns, and our minds transform it into the reality of the photograph. In electronic media, closure is constant, even overpowering. In film, closure takes place continuously, 24 times per second, in fact, as our minds, aided by the persistence of vision, transform a series of still pictures into a story of continuous motion. A medium requiring even more closure is television, which in reality is just a single point of light, racing across the screen so fast that it's described my face hundreds of times before you can even swallow that corn chip. Between such automatic electronic closure and the simpler closure of everyday life, there lies a medium of communication and expression which uses closure like no other. A medium where the audience is a willing and conscious collaborator, and closure is the agent of change, time, and motion. Let's take a look and appreciate this portion of a comic book story. Now you die. No, no. Yeah! See that space between the panels. McCloud is referring, of course, to this blank space over here. The panels, that's what comics aficionados have named the gutter. And despite its unceremonious title, the gutter plays host to much of the magic and mystery that are at the very heart of comics. Here, in the limbo of the gutter, human imagination takes two separate images and transforms them into a single idea. Nothing is seen between the two panels, but experience tells you something must be there. Reminding again all of you of the peekaboo game and its resemblance to the gutter theory that the comics aficionados state and McCloud so eloquently displays to us here. Comics panels fracture both time and space, offering a jagged staccato rhythm of unconnected moments. But closure allows us to connect these moments and mentally construct a continuous, unified reality. If visual iconography is the vocabulary of comics, closure is its grammar. And since our definition of comics hinges on the arrangement of elements, then, in a very real sense, comics is closure. The closure of electronic media is continuous, largely involuntary, and virtually imperceptible. But closure in comics is far from continuous and anything but involuntary. Every act committed to paper by the comics artist is aided and abetted by a silent accomplice, an equal partner in crime, known as the reader. I may have drawn an axe being raised in this example, but I am not the one who let it drop or decide how hard the blow or who screamed or why. That, dear reader, was your special crime, each of you committing it in your own style. All of you participated in the murder. All of you held the axe and chose your spot. To kill a man between panels is to condemn him to 1,000 deaths. Then you're probably asking me, how so? Well, if you remember the previous picture, we have a villain and a sultan, a murderer, you can call it him anything over here, carrying or raising on an axe and about to display a punch or how do I call that? Movement with the axe towards the victim or the imminent to be victim. Okay. But the limbo is so great, or the gutter, if you prefer, is so great that we as readers have the authority to choose how has the axe hit the victim. Could have been in his head, could have been in his shoulder, could have been in his waist, could have been in any part of his body. And also, it could have been a very serious injury or could even have killed the victim. If you all remember Avengers Infinity War, at the very end of it, and Thanos tipped to Thor, you should have aimed for the head. Probably if the guy aimed for the head, the victim would have perished, would have died. But if the axe has hit any other part, the victim would just be seriously wounded. I am guessing as much as you are, because we are allowed to do so because of the gutter power. Right? Let's move on then. Participation is a powerful force in any medium. Filmmakers long ago realized the importance of allowing viewers to use their imagination. But while film makes use of audiences' imaginations for occasional effects, comics must use it far more often. From the tossing of a baseball to the death of a planet, the reader's deliberate, voluntary closure is comics' primary means of simulating time and motion. Closure in comics fosters all intimacy surpassed only by the written word, a silent, secret contract between creator and audience. How the creator honors that contract is a matter of both art and craft. Let's take a look at the craft, and we are going to take this look together in our synchronous class this Friday. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry. See you there. Bye bye.